Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Noble. Hello everyone, I am Ruben Ray Igaro III and I will be discussing the step number 3, which is to plan your data collection procedures. Now, when you already have what methods you will be using, you will then need to exactly plan how you will be implementing them. And you will also need to consider what procedures will you follow in order to make accurate observations or measurements of the variables that you are interested in. For instance, if you're conducting surveys or interviews, you need to decide what forms the questions will be taking. And if you're conducting an experiment, you need to make decisions about your experimental design. Speaking of experimental design, it simply means to create a set of procedures in order to test a hypothesis. Now, in creating a good experimental design, it simply requires a strong understanding of the system that you are studying. And here are 5 key steps in order to create or design an experiment. First is you need to consider your variables and determine how they are related. Second one is to write a specific and testable hypothesis. Third one is to design experimental treatments in order to manipulate your independent variables. The fourth one would be to assign subjects to groups, either between subjects or within subjects. And lastly, you need to plan how you will measure your dependent variables. So another part of the step number 3 is the sampling. Now you may need to develop a sampling plan in order to obtain data more systematically. So this involves defining a population, which is the group that you want to draw conclusions about, and a sample, which is the group that you want to actually collect data from. The next part would be standardizing procedures. Now, if multiple researchers are involved, you can write a detailed manual in order to standardize the data collections procedures in your study. Now, this means to lay out specific step-by-step instructions so that everyone in your team can collect data in a very consistent way. An example of this is by conducting an experiment under the same conditions and using objective criteria to record and categorize your observations. Now, this helps ensure that your data is reliable and you can also use it to replicate the study in the future. For the last part of step number 3, let's proceed to creating data management plan. So before you begin with your data collection, you need to decide on how to organize and store your data. So if you are obtaining data from people, you need to anonymize and safeguard the data in order to prevent any leaks of sensitive information. And if you are collecting data via interviews or pencil and paper formats, you will need to perform transcriptions or data entry in systematic ways in order to minimize distortion. Lastly, you can prevent loss of data by having an organization system that is routinely backed up. Since we are done with step number 3, let's proceed to step number 4, which is the data collection. So finally, you can implement your chosen methods in order to measure and observe the variables that you are interested in. So in order to ensure that high quality data is recorded or obtained in a systematic way, here are some of the best practices. So first one would be to record all relevant information as and when you obtain the data. The second one is to always double check manual data entry for errors. The third and last would be, if you collect quantitative data, you can assess the reliability and validity to get an indication of your data quality. It is really important to ensure accurate and appropriate data collection. So regardless of the field of study or the preference for defining data, be it qualitative or quantitative, accurate data collection is essential in maintaining the integrity of the research. So both the selection of appropriate data collection instrument and the clearly described instrument for its use will both likely reduce the errors occurring. So if we fail to ensure the accurate and appropriate data collection, there will be consequences. Now, a few of these consequences will be the inability to answer research questions accurately. Second would be the inability to repeat and validate the study. Third would be distorted findings resulting in wasted resources. The fourth one would be misleading other researchers to pursue fruitless avenues of investigation. The fifth one would be to compromise decisions for public policy. And last but not the least, you would cause harm to human participants and animal subjects. Now let's proceed to the qualitative data collection techniques. So, qualitative data are narrative, meaning the data themselves are words. Now, these words may appear in the form of interview transcriptions, journal entries, observational notes, and or existing documents or reports. So, they may be collected using a variety of techniques, but it is also important to remember that the resulting qualitative data will always consist of descriptive narrative accounts. And a few of these are observations, videotapes, interviews, focus groups, and or existing documents or reports. Now let's talk about the quantitative data collection techniques. So in contrast to qualitative data, quantitative data are numerical, meaning anything that can be counted, quantified, tallied, or even rated can be considered as quantitative data. Now, this includes not only items that can be counted, but also the ratings of one's feelings, attitudes, interests, or even perception on some sort of numerical scale. So, generally speaking, quantitative data collection techniques are more efficient because you can collect data from numerous individuals simultaneously. However, the depth of those data does not even begin to compare when using the qualitative techniques. So, in quantitative data collection techniques, this includes surveys, questionnaires, checklists, rating scales, and as well as tests and other formal types of measurement instruments.